Hi, everyone, and welcome to Unlock Vehicle Differentiation, Apply Variable Management to Merchandising. This automotive news webinar is brought to you by vAuto. We're delighted you're with us for this presentation. I'm Emma Hancock, host, strategist, and moderator at Automotive News. Before I introduce our speaker today, a navigation tip. We encourage you to ask questions at any time. Just type them into the Q&A box on the left side of the webinar window and then hit send. I will steer your questions to our speaker toward the end of the session. Today's speaker is Nathan Fox, AVP of Business Services at Cox Automotive Inventory Management Solutions. And now I'll turn it over to Nathan to get us started.
Great, thanks, Emma. And thanks everyone for joining today. As Emma said, my name is Nathan Fox, and I work at vAuto and I lead our merchandising software business. And with our industry becoming more dynamic and more unpredictable than ever, I wanted to spend this webinar talking about how using the right story for every car can tap into a shopper's willingness to pay more so you can get your asking price. And so over the next 30 minutes or so, I'll touch on three kind of core areas. I'll start off with some market dynamics that are really shaping the merchandising landscape and discuss how those are evolving the market in which we operate. Then I'll move on to discussing vehicle-specific merchandising strategies and how by employing this, you can optimize the results at your dealership. And close with some real-world examples, some practical tips on how you can start to implement this as you leave this webinar. So let's start with a topic that I think we're all familiar with, something that's hard to miss today, which is the power of information and data. It's all around us in our industry, outside of industry. It's been shaping the car market for years, if not decades. And I think everywhere we turn, whether it's a tailored recommendation from Alexa, a new article on how generative AI is going to change an element of our world, or countless other things that we embrace every day, we see information and data changing what happens in the marketplace and in our industry. And it's difficult to predict how some of those things will manifest and translate into the future. But if you look at some of the shifts that have occurred over the last number of years within the automotive industry, there are two that I think explain a lot about where we've been, where we are, and I think where we may go. The first of which is a dealer's ability to make more tailored decisions using data. And the second is shoppers' access to more and more and more information. And while those two shifts on the surface may seem simple, when you take those together, they actually impact every aspect of how we retail used inventory. So let's look at how these two shifts have affected two of the most important parts of retailing decisions, merchandising and pricing. Let's start with a pricing decision. It may be the single most important decision that's made about a vehicle when it comes to how am I going to retail it. And over the course of time, there's been an evolution in how dealers make that decision. If we rewind to kind of the pre-listings era, most dealers used a cost-plus approach, where they would simply decide what profit do I want to make on that vehicle, and then set the price accordingly and wait for a buyer to show up and purchase it. And this worked for years, but began to break down. As shoppers gained more access to information, it became easier for shoppers to look across the inventory in their local market. Dealers began to evolve. And how did they evolve? They started to look for data, supply and demand data and metrics, things like price to market and market days supply, insights that help them to make better pricing decisions, decisions that ensure that they were competitive in the marketplace and therefore driving their inventory into the hands of shoppers. But as data has become richer and richer, we're starting to see this evolve once again. And dealers are beginning to adopt more of an ROI-driven pricing model, one where richer data science is enabling dealers to understand the unique investment potential of every vehicle and tailor their decisions more specifically to that vehicle to unlock more profitability in their portfolio. And just as these two shifts have evolved the pricing landscape, evolved the way we make pricing decisions, it's impacted the merchandising business as well. And again, rewinding to that period, kind of pre-listings, if you think about merchandising, at least merchandising outside of the showroom, it was really just classifieds. 5 to 7 words in a newspaper. It's a pretty short story to tell about a vehicle. Very limited amount of information that is helping the consumer to understand why that vehicle may be right for them. But again, as tools changed, as the market landscape shifted, so did the way merchandising occurred. And dealers began to embrace photos. And as the old adage goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so merchandising, or the story about that vehicle, went from being 5 to 7 words to thousands of words told through photos. And this has really set the bar for being the best practice within the industry today. And as I look across, most dealerships, dealers are doing a tremendous job of capturing high quality photos on every vehicle. And while there was a lot of learning and a lot of evolution in the process to capture photos, the dealers that embraced that early on saw the benefits and their dealership thrived. As we see this next shift that's being driven by access to data and information, we're not seeing the shift quite yet in merchandising, which is starting to create this out of sync nature between the way vehicles are priced and the way the merchandising is showing up to shoppers. And as those two start to move a bit out of sync, there's an implication to that, which is a price realization gap, or the difference in a price being asked for the vehicle and the price the shopper is willing to pay. You may ask, why does this occur? And it occurs because the data and information is mismatched, in that dealers are using richer and richer data to make pricing decisions, optimizing the price down to a more granular level, knowing what the underpinnings are of the value of that vehicle at a very specific layer based upon market information, vehicle insights, dealership performance. However, not all of that is being conveyed to the shopper. So if the shopper doesn't understand the fundamental value proposition of that vehicle, how will they ever price it or value it where the price is? And that's what creates the gap, or the price realization gap. And this seems to manifest in two scenarios within the market on a daily basis. The first of which is vehicles are sold too low. In this scenario, dealers tend to overlook the data they have access to, overlook the rich insights that tell them what the vehicle is worth in the marketplace, and price the vehicle below that. And as a result, they miss out on incremental profitability. The second scenario that commonly occurs is shoppers overlook a vehicle. And this happens when a dealer prices the vehicle according to the data, prices it optimally, but because they haven't conveyed the information that underpins that price, consumers may not search for it. They may not dig through the details of the VDP to find that. And as a result, they may skip over that, thinking it's an overpriced vehicle. And this has the impact of increasing the time to sell. Neither of these are optimal outcomes for the dealer, which creates an opportunity for us to improve as an industry, an opportunity to drive better results. And as we think about how do we drive better results, it comes down to using a variable approach to merchandising, thinking about how to tell the right story on each vehicle every time. And when I talk to dealers about the next evolution in their merchandising, I often hear, this is daunting. I have dozens, if not hundreds of cars passing through my inventory every month. How do I start to tailor the story I tell on every single vehicle? And in my opinion, the place to start any journey is to start where you get the most value. And so the place you're going to get the most value is the place where the consumer wants that information, where the consumer is willing to pay more for the vehicle if they understand that attribute. So let's look at some data on what consumers want to see when they're looking at a listing. What is it that's valuable to the consumer when they are thinking about a vehicle and assessing it on a listings page, a marketplace, or another location? The first two things that come to the list are price and mileage. The good news is dealers do a great job. Almost every vehicle has a price, mileage, and photos. That's sort of the baseline of merchandising today. Where this gets really interesting is when you click into that next layer of what's valuable to consumers. Things such as technology features, extended warranties and certification, and reconditioning like new tires and new brakes. All of which are items that consumers want to see, place a high value on, and are willing to open their wallets and pay more for if they know it exists on the vehicle. So let's dig a little deeper into some of those, because I think they serve as great start points on what type of information you want to embed into the stories you tell about your vehicles in order to get your asking price. Tires and brakes. When I analyze and dig through listing profiles, I rarely see tires and brakes highlighted in a compelling front-facing way on merchandising. Same goes when I ask dealers if it's something that they focus on. And so I think this might be the single biggest opportunity when it comes to merchandising. And I say that because as an industry, there's over $4 billion invested annually in new tires and new brakes. That's a significant amount of capital invested to improve the vehicles you have in your inventory portfolio. And in analyzing repair order data, what we find is that a typical franchise dealer will put new tires on roughly 30 vehicles a month. This equates to somewhere in the neighborhood of a third of their inventory. Both of these data points are strong indications that dealers see value in improving vehicles through new tires and new brakes, replacing wearables that build to a safety story, providing a better product to the shopper. And shoppers see this value as well. In fact, 7 out of 10 shoppers are willing to pay more for a vehicle if it has new brakes or new tires. Let me repeat that. 7 out of 10 shoppers are willing to pay more for a car if it has either new brakes or new tires. And so this opportunity to tap into that $4 billion of investment, making sure that the consumer understands when this exists on a vehicle, because they will open their wallet and pay more for that car. And so as you start to think about how do you begin this journey of telling a story about that vehicle, the story that unlocks willingness to pay, this would be the first opportunity that I would underscore. Let's look at a second opportunity, features. Not just any set of features, but technology features. I think we all see in the industry that technology is becoming a bigger and bigger part of every vehicle. And this recent study from Deloitte highlights that we're now north of 40% of the total cost of a new car goes into electronics, and that's forecasted to grow going forward. And dealers know that these technology features are important and drive the value of the vehicle. They account for it in the way they appraise a car and the way they price a car. But technology features create a new challenge when it comes to merchandising. And that's because many technology features aren't visible in photos. So go back to what we started with around merchandising today. It relies predominantly on photos. And while a photo is worth 1,000 words, if you can't see that technology feature, then it's missed, it's overlooked. There's no way to drive awareness through a photo. And just like we talked about with the tires and brakes, this is another area where consumers are willing to pay more, willing to open their wallet and pay additional money for a vehicle if it has specific technology features. At Viato and Cox Automotive, we're always doing some forward-looking research. And we recently did a piece of research that looked at the willingness to pay for technology features on a subscription model. And while this model isn't something that's common in the market today, what it highlights is that there's a huge amount of revenue potential in technology. Close to $2 billion of untapped revenue through things like safety and security, parking assist, Wi-Fi, and other technology features that consumers put so much value on that they would pay a subscription fee every month, which also says if they know that technology feature is available, they'd be happy to roll that cost into the loan, into the cost of the vehicle to get access to it. And so once again, making sure that becomes part of the story is crucial if you want to get to the asking price, that optimal price that you've identified through all the rich data you use. And so regardless of how high quality the photo is, like this Audi photo here, there's no way to easily showcase that it has a digital key or reverse cameras or other automated features without doing other things to make sure that that is part of the story. Let's move on to a third opportunity. I'll give you 3 places to really start doubling down on the story you tell about the vehicle. And this one is certified pre-owned. I think most of you would probably say we do a great job at our dealership highlighting certified. It's sort of like price, mileage, and photos. It's always there. I'd concur. But if I go back to my opening comments about our industry becoming more dynamic, if this is where the industry shifted, and just identifying certification is no longer enough to capture all the value. A couple of data points on those shifts and how that affects the way you think about certification in your merchandising. The first, over the last 4 years, we've seen the intention of shoppers from a CPO perspective increase. So a higher percent of shoppers are now considering CPO, moving from just over a third in 2019 to almost 50%, or almost 1 in 2 shoppers considering a CPO vehicle. And when you think about the dynamics that we faced as an industry, this makes perfect sense. Things such as MSRP hitting record levels, making new cars unattainable for some shoppers, forcing them to contemplate a certified or some other type of vehicle other than new. Or all the supply constraints that we faced and in some places continue to face, where someone looking for a specific make and model may not be able to find it as a new car and therefore turn to a certified vehicle to get the car they're seeking. But the other thing that shifted in that period that's even more interesting is the knowledge level of certification. Today, only 38% of shoppers considering a certified vehicle know a lot about the benefits of certification. If I invert that 38%, that would say 6 in 10 shoppers that are thinking about a certified vehicle don't understand all the value that it provides. If they don't understand the value and the benefits of certification, how are they going to be willing to pay the highest price premium for the investment you've made in certifying that car? And that's exactly what we see in another piece of research, where the premium that shoppers are willing to pay for a certified vehicle reaches upwards of $4,000. But you also see that a higher number of consumers are attracted to a certified vehicle at a lower price premium, which again makes perfect sense in the context of that last data point. The consumer who doesn't understand all the benefits of certification is going to be willing to pay less than the consumer that does. And so to maximize the price premium you get out of your certification and the investment you make in that vehicle, it requires more than just making the consumer aware that the vehicle is certified. It's educating them on things like the extended warranty and the inspection you put the vehicle through. It's helping them understand why they should have a higher level of confidence, why they should be paying more for that vehicle because of the certification. And this is driven out of the shift in our market, the shift into what consumers know today. So I've given you 3 areas where there's billions of dollars of untapped price realization opportunity. 3 areas where you can begin to tell a really specific story, a variable merchandising story about your vehicle. Let's move on to kind of the third section of this presentation or webinar and talk a little bit more about some tools and case studies that can perhaps help with how much you implement or how much you showcase that in a compelling way within your merchandising. And so to start, I think it's important to think through, well, where does the shopper actually make that decision? Where is this information most valuable? And it's on the product page. The product page, or the VDP in the case of our industry, is where shoppers make decisions, whether they're making a decision to buy an ice maker on Amazon or making a decision to buy a car via AutoTrader. And while we know that the Buy Now button gets clicked an awful lot on Amazon, or at least in my household it does, the Buy Now button is not always clicked as much in our industry, but the decision is made in our industry digitally on the product page. 2 statistics that underscore that. 1, 71% of shoppers only compare cars online, which means they're no longer coming to the showroom to compare vehicles and decide which one they want to choose. They're using all the digital tools. They're using the product page to compare vehicles, deciding which vehicle is right for them. The second statistic reinforces that a step farther, which is 1 in 2 1 in 2 car buyers only visit one dealership, which is a clear sign that once they've made that decision, they're going to the dealership simply to complete the transaction, or maybe to validate that decision and complete the transaction. But the majority of shoppers are using that product page as the mechanism to decide on the vehicle, even though we're not to the point of buy now like we are at Amazon or other e-commerce sites. And so knowing how important the product page is, this is where I think you want to focus the story that you tell around that vehicle. One click farther into that product page, to drive a little bit more emphasis on where to focus, would be a statistic that comes from dealer.com, in that 67% of shoppers that interact with us or have a session on dealer.com interact with the VDP photo carousel. It's the photo carousel where the shopper's most engaged at a rate 4 times higher other areas of the VDP. And why do I highlight this? Because if you're going to start to really invest in the journey to improve the story you tell, I would advise that you invest in the area where the shopper's already engaged. Don't make them go someplace where they have to change their behavior, but meet them where they are. And that's the photo carousel, or sometimes I refer to it as a media carousel because of all the rich opportunities to embed content beyond just photos into that space, whether it be 360-degree spins or other types of enriched content. And so I've talked some about Amazon previously. I'm going to take a moment to step outside of our industry and use an Amazon example as a case study. The fact that e-commerce and online buying has been slightly ahead of in other industries outside of ours gives us an opportunity to learn how they optimize for this. I think we can take those learnings and then apply them to the way we merchandise within the automotive industry. And so here's an example of a relatively inexpensive item on Amazon, a wallet, price point a little less than $15. And what's striking is when you look at the comparison of this product page to a typical VDP, it's not all that different. It starts with high quality photos that really fill the bulk of the first page, provides a little bit of other descriptive information, but it's that emphasis on photos. The same thing I just mentioned about the VDP page and the engagement rate with photos. Same sort of behavior exists within other industries. But what starts to change is as you click through that photo carousel, what you'll start to see here in a moment is how, in this case, the seller has begun to tell a story about this wallet, a story that connects with the shopper and highlights the things that's going to ensure that they win their business and drive them to pay for it. Here's an example of an image that isn't just an image, but it includes textual overlays, calling out things like 12 card slots. Why is that interesting? Because it's a non-visible feature, similar to my comment about technology features. If I was in a store, I could easily pick this wallet up, examine it, and determine that I could probably put 12 credit cards in it. There's no way for me to ascertain that by looking at a photo. Same goes with technology. If I'm sitting in the vehicle, in the cockpit, it's quite easy to start to see the technology by clicking through screens, having a salesperson highlight what's on that vehicle. But in a digital world, if you don't become intentional about highlighting those non-visible items, they'll go overlooked. And if they go overlooked, the consumer is not going to put a value on them, and therefore they're going to pay less for that item, for that vehicle. Here's a second image from this wallet. RFID blocking technology to safeguard your personal data. You know, one, I never thought about RFID blocking technology in a wallet. Interesting. But when you start to elevate that, put it in context of what it really means about safeguarding your data, make it more of a benefit, it makes it even more valuable to the consumer. If I compare that to the conversation earlier on tires and brakes, we know that just informing consumers of tires and brakes that have been replaced in the vehicle drives a willingness to pay. But putting it in the context of how important it is to the safety of the vehicle, how much you may pay if you had to replace those on your own, or additional details about warranties, et cetera, all add to that benefit, all add to that story around why that element is really, really valuable to the consumer. And one more example from the wallet experience here, gift box packaging. This one may feel a little bit like a throwaway. Why would you highlight gift box packaging? In the case of this wallet, I think it's because it's reinforcing to the consumer that this is such a high quality item that you should feel proud to give it as a gift to a friend or to yourself. It builds confidence, builds trust in purchasing this product. It reinforces things that may be assumed but not realized. Again, back to the example of certification that we talked about a moment ago. Just by highlighting certification, you may not actually connect from that emotional perspective with the consumer. By giving them the details behind it, the extended warranty, the inspection, all the things that make certification valuable, connects with the consumer on a deeper, more emotional way. And so I think we can look outside our industry and learn a lot from the way that great merchants have optimized within other forms of e-commerce, and take that and optimize the way that we present vehicles. We tell the story to the shopper so that we can maximize the return that we get on each and every vehicle in our industry. But at vAuto, we started with a case study outside our industry, but we also wanted to make sure that these things resonated with shoppers within the automotive industry. And they do. In fact, when we survey consumers and we ask them about the power of image overlays, we find 8 in 10 consumers actually prefer to have information overlaid on an image. Not surprising, because they're accustomed to seeing it in other places. They're accustomed to seeing it where they're shopping online, whether it be Amazon or some other marketplace. And so this gives us the potential, this gives us the opportunity to really lean into using tools like overlays and billboards to provide more information, to embed things into the photo story, to enrich that story with consumers. The other really interesting nugget that came out of this piece of research is that the information that you overlay onto a photo doesn't necessarily have to be relevant to that photo to be valuable. So here's a second photo from that research, same image, different overlay. And what we found when we asked consumers, which of these is more valuable to you? It was a mixed bag. Some liked one and some liked the other. And that was validation that as long as we're giving valuable information to the shopper, enriching the story with things that are important to them, the things that they're willing to pay more for, it's beneficial. So as we start the journey of telling this stronger story, we don't have to strive for perfection. We don't have to make everything perfect. We just have to start getting better. And so over the last 30 minutes or so, I've covered a lot. I've talked about the shift, the ongoing shift in data and information, how that continues to evolve the way we retail vehicles, the way we price, the way we merchandise. We've talked about the price realization gap if we don't ensure that we educate consumers by telling the story on vehicles that unlock all of their potential. And then we've delved a little deeper into 3 areas where there's billions and billions of dollars to realize price and optimize the outcomes at your dealership. Things like new tires and brakes, where over $4 billion is invested in those vehicles annually, and not always captured because it goes unaware to the consumer. Technology features or other high-value, non-visible items that the consumer may never recognize is on that vehicle without some help in telling the story. And certification, acknowledging and realizing that our market is more dynamic than ever, and that the practice that worked 5 years ago may not be the same practice that works in informing the consumer about the benefits today. And so as you think about that opportunity and think about ways to begin to unlock some of that value, I hope you've taken away some powerful insights as well as some specific and practical tips that you can take back to your dealership and begin to think about how you might implement a variable approach to merchandising at your dealership. With that, I'd love to turn it back over to Emma. We'd love to take any questions that the audience has on anything I spoke about today. So please put your questions in the chat, and I know Emma will get to all of them that we can over the next number of minutes that we have with you.
Nathan, thank you. That was a really great presentation. This whole subject of merchandising is so interesting. And yes, we have some questions that I'd love to get into now. So I'm going to start with one. You mentioned processes for merchandising several times during your presentation. Are there any approaches or practices that you have seen work efficiently for other dealers?
Sure, Emma. Yes, I did reference process quite a bit. I think the things I've seen that are working effectively for dealers kind of have a couple things in common. The first and foremost is that dealers are using simplified workflows to capture and document the information that's necessary, information that ties to the value, but they're leaning into tools that help to automate the repetitive steps. And so they are leaning into the data and information and the automation that makes their process more efficient. In the case of Viato dealers, what I see a lot of dealers doing on those two fronts, one is they use starred feature functionality within the tool as a simple way to capture information, whether that be new tires or technology features or other information. It is one way to document information that may not be available through a VIN explosion. And then they lean into tools like Viato Intelligent Promotion, a merchandising suite that has a lot of automation capability to apply that to their merchandising. And so I think it's that blending and that balance of using workflows where you need to do thinking and you need to apply your own intelligence, but then allowing tools to automate the things that are just repetitive.
Mm-hmm. No, it's good advice. So I know you talked a lot about, added value and making sure that, those things are unlocked and noted. So including tires and brakes in merchandising makes a lot of sense. And you did cover that. Are there other reconditioning items that are valuable to include as well? Is there any other tips there?
Yes. And let me start with why I emphasize tires and brakes as being the most overlooked opportunity, because I think it highlights the next tier of reconditioning items that can be included. Tires and brakes have a couple of things that are in common, but also I think elevate those two. First is relatively high dollar amount invested when those are part of the reconditioning process, done at a pretty high frequency. But I think most importantly is there's a high level of consumer understanding that new tires or new brakes is always good. Consumers have largely had to open their wallet and put their credit card on the counter to pay for one of those items. And so they recognize that value without a lot of additional explanation. As I look at the research we've done around other reconditioned items, things that have some of that in common, other wearable items, particularly related to mechanical or safety, are items that when consumers see those, they associate favorable attributions to the vehicle in the majority of situations. And so those types of items would be the next tier. So whether that be a battery replacement or something else that the consumer understands is a wearable and understands is going to need replaced. It gets a little bit less clear when you get into some of the mechanical items that are more repair-oriented items. Transmission work or things of that nature. And what you find is it's a little bit more mixed, where 49% of consumers actually say they may look at the vehicle more negatively when you highlight those. And I think that goes back to they don't understand that. They don't have the contextual relevancy at their fingertips to know, is that a good thing or a bad thing about the car? Am I buying a lemon or is this making an improvement? And so, leaning into those spaces where the consumer has the relevancy, the context at the forefront is where I go next. I think then the next tranche is going to require the dealer to put those into a contextual set of information for the shopper so that they make the right conclusion and they don't conclude the right thing or the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. Those items are so tangible and they're so immediate, and it's so, like you said, so much clearer than talking about an alternator or something like that, they're not going to be able to imagine and they've never had to buy it themselves. Okay, a couple more questions here, Nathan.
Sure.
Question here from Frank. How are the green digital key banner and red new tires installed banner created within Viato? Is there a simple explanation there?
Yes, Frank. So within Viato, we have a suite of tools under the Intelligent Promotion merchandising offering that allows you to use multiple ways to embed information into the carousel. So there are image overlays, text overlays, and billboard insertion. And those can all be configured in a way where it pulls data from the Viato system. So it pulls from starred features or pulls from other elements within the data set and applies it to the right vehicles. And so within Viato, that Intelligent Promotion suite of tools has a lot of flexibility to automate some of those processes. You simply set up a promotion, it's called, which is essentially saying, this is the type of information I want to put on this vehicle. So I may want to put different information on a certified than on a used. And then that information is automatically extracted from the Viato system and applied to your merchandising feed.
Perfect. Great. Okay. One last question here. It's more of a comment. We have Butch who is saying windshields also with the high price of those. So would you ever add windshields, as an added value? If it was new, I guess. I mean, there's some trucks, depending on, the rake of the windshield, you can go through quite a bit of them.
Yeah, I think, the research that I've seen on windshields, that falls lower on the list. I think partially why it falls lower on the list is I think there's more of an expectation that a car has a windshield in good repair. And so I think it's one, again, back to my comment around putting it in context. Perhaps on older vehicles where, it may be maybe more common that a windshield is not as in good of repair. That may be a differentiator. And so I think on things where the benefit's not quite as obvious to the shopper, placing those in a contextual situation. And so I think this is where when I engage with dealers, they have so much insight about their shoppers and how they make it relevant. I would lean into how do you make that relevant for a shopper when they're in the showroom? And if there's a way to put it in a contextual form, I think then it certainly would have value to them.
Yeah, there's definitely two camps out there. I feel like there's people that have never had to replace the windshield, and then there's people maybe like me who've had to replace several. And so it becomes something that you do think about. But yeah, it's not something people immediately think about. Another question here from Alexandra. It's long, but it's an interesting point here. So how do you reconcile the fact that third parties like Google and Facebook, who have various free and paid products used to push inventory, often block a photo or even the entire listing of any image that they detect text or overlays on? So maybe you're aware of this, Nathan. So usually it's just the first photo in the series that's an issue for them. Hard to tell, but that's the photos people see on SRPs, whether the dealer website or on listing sites like AutoTrader, et cetera. We've had to remove overlays altogether to not cause issues with Google specifically. So I'm assuming you're aware of this.
I am, and I think Google's presence from their current cars for sale program is growing, right? I think it exited sort of their beta pilot earlier this year, and it's become a much bigger part of, I think, how dealers are thinking about listing their vehicles. I think Google's dipping into a lot of the things that Amazon does, right? If you look at the way Amazon runs their SRP and VDP, right? The SRP tends to be a fairly clear photo of the product. And then as you get into the VDP or the product page, so think about the wallet example I highlighted, the images that had the incremental content sat behind the SRP photo. I think the SRP photo, sometimes the goal is to create simplicity, so things are easier to digest on a page that has 20, 40, 50 items on it. It's a challenge that we've struggled with at times with some of the tools we have on making sure that the feed works for Google and also works within other listing sites. But I would say that if Google doesn't allow some of this information within the product page space, then it's going to undermine the ability to tell the best story about that vehicle. It's trying to commoditize products that aren't commodities, right?
Yes.
I think we know that every car is different when it's a used vehicle. And if you can't tell that story, you're actually going to confuse the shopper more than you're going to help the shopper. And so I suspect that Google will continue to learn in the marketplace. We're continuing to work on adopting and adapting our tools so that they're flexible with the way the market is evolving. We deal with the dynamic nature of the market as well. As it changes, we have to change our tools as well. And so there's some things we're working on today to allow for some more flexibility in the way the experience is delivered to different sites.
I mean, that's really merchandising. What it's all about is just showing those differences and how the vehicles are so different once they're not new anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Nathan, I think we're just about at the end here of our webinar. And I just want to address, Randy just had a question here about the recording of this video. And of course, this will be on autonews.com very shortly. But I think we're just about at the end.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Emma, for allowing me to join. I appreciate everybody taking 40 minutes out of their day. I know it is never dull at the dealership, so I really appreciate the time, and I hope you found some valuable insights that can help you produce better outcomes at your dealership.
Yeah, it was a great presentation. That brings us to the end of our webinar. Thanks to today's audience. Again, for the questions, if you asked a question that we didn't get a chance to answer, our friends at vAuto will follow up by email. If you learned something from this session, please tell your peers about it. The recording will be available in about an hour. You'll find it at autonews.com/webinars. When the webinar ends, a survey will pop up on your screen. We genuinely appreciate your feedback as it helps us create future webinars that are even more beneficial to you. Thanks again to Nathan and vAuto for bringing us this presentation, and to you for joining us. On behalf of everyone at Automotive News, have a great rest of your day.